on these historic reforms. I'm joined by Huo Deming in Beijing. He's a professor at the National School of Development in Peking University. Welcome back to Biz Asia America, Professor. Let me start with this. We've got a lot of questions. I just want to start with the first one, which is the easiest one. Was this a surprise to you, all these reforms?
Well, since last Tuesday, after the communique, we thought that was it. But then by the late evening, or early evening, in last Friday, and the 60 assignments came out. So I think that's quite a surprise. After the market and this week, the stock market response to show it. It's a surprise.
A lot of people are comparing this to something not too long ago, 1978, when there was a round of significant reforms that obviously affected and urged China into the modern sort of economy that it is today. Is it fair to make that comparison with this round of reforms that's being proposed?
I disagree. The reform in 1978 as well as the reform in 1993, those were the two reforms conducted by the late premier leaders, Deng Xiaoping. Now, Deng Xiaoping has the supreme power back then, but we're talking about 20 years after. Either Xi Jinping or Li Keqiang, they don't have that supreme power. So this kind of reform has to depend on people's need. That is, for the last 10 years, a lost decade has been generally claimed. So people are anticipating reform, and that is the anticipation came true.
There's been a lot of discussion over the past few years about inflation, how that's been affecting the working and middle class in China. How big of an impact will these policies, these new policies that are being proposed, how big of an impact will they have?
Okay, in terms of inflation, actually, for the last couple of years, it's not that bad. It's average around 3 to 4%, at highest no more than 6%. So I would say in the future, people would expect more from their financial income, so their return on their savings, as well as others, the stock market returns, they would also be expecting higher. So that will be able to combat more inflation if that is going to happen in the future.
We've talked about demographics before. Obviously, the one-child policy in focus, that looks like it's going to be changing quite significantly. How big of an impact is that going to have, and what's been the reaction so far from within China?
Okay, about the one-child policy, actually, we have been calling for the correction of that, reforming, and actually that has been done since 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Now, this newly announced policy, which aimed at a specific group of the parents that they're allowed to have a second child, I think that's also long overdue. So in the long run, we were always expecting that China finally would relax its one-child policy, and hopefully all the industries associated with the demographic will become normal in a sense that in the future, China need not to worry about the aging population.
Vivi was talking about earlier in our markets report from Shanghai about how the dairy products and baby makers and, of course, all the things associated with kids and education seem to be on the rise in terms of the markets. Do you see the longer-term impact as being more for the family-oriented investments, or do you see more of it on terms of like a macro level for the country in terms of just the overall population as a whole?
I would call it more of a consumer-related business, or the child-raising businesses. Of course, that relates to education, that relates to all kinds of aspects of demographies. But in terms of our structure, consumption, investment, this one-child policy relaxation definitely contribute much to the consumption side and not to the investment side. I think that's a good sign.
Professor Huo Deming, I'm sure you're very busy analyzing these reports. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us.